Lynn, who I think is on this call. We
Mhm.
had a fantastic time. I would be thinking about it for this March, but I'm going to be with my grandson and daughter on the East Coast, so I won't be able to join. But it doesn't matter if you've been to Israel 20 times, as my cousin has, or never, as happened to me before 2023. It's an amazing thing. You'll have 750 of your best friends by the time you leave, all from Chabads around the United States. Wonderful people. Every rabbi is better than the next. Every rebbitzin is better than the next, but we have the best. But anyway, there are so many things to do. You don't have to do the same thing in lockstep. And so I hope all of you will seriously consider it, because it's a fantastic experience. And our rabbi and rebbitzin lead our little group on a frequent basis. Maybe not every single experience, but you're always well taken care of. And we have bodyguards who help us, and wonderful guides and everything. It's wonderful. I just wanted to put in that public service announcement for
Thank you
anybody.
so much, Nancy. Thank you.
Thank
Yeah, we're looking forward to it as well. Thank you. Thank you. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are learning in Yana Shal Torah Chassidus, which means on the essence of Chassidus. It's going to be from this book. I'm going to give a quick review. We are in section or chapter 4, which really gets into the thick of it. We're going to learn about Mashiach today, which is an awesome topic. But let's just give a little bit of a review. So about Chassidus, and this talk was actually said on the 19th of Kislev, which is coming up on the calendar next week, which marks the birth of the Chabad Chassidus, when the day the Alter Rebbe, the first Chabad Rebbe, who authored the Tanya, was liberated from his Tsarist imprisonment in the 1790s. So the Rebbe, in honor of that occasion, the Rebbe said a beautiful talk in 1965 about what Chassidus is. And the Rebbe starts by saying that Chassidus brought a lot of contributions to the world. According to some, and there's different angles of how to understand it, and all of them are true. It was historically a very hard time for the Jewish people before Chassidus came about, before the Baal Shem Tov in the 1700s. And Chassidus came through the Baal Shem Tov and really revived the Jewish world from a spiritual state of slumber. Chassidus also teaches us of how to go above and beyond the letter of the law. There's the letter of the law that we have to do as Jews, and observing Shabbat and observing everything else. Beyond the letter of the law is going a step further. The example the Rebbe brings here is the idea with the nails, that in the general, there's different things that you could do with your nails. It says a wicked person just throws them on the floor, but the nails could be harmful for people to step on, especially pregnant women. It could have a harm spiritually. It could harm the fetus. So therefore, we're careful to discard of them properly. The normal way of discarding them, and it says that tzaddik does this way, which is to burn them. Sorry, a tzaddik does, he buries them. The worry is if you bury them, there's a chance that it could come back up. So therefore, a chassid is one. Look at those hands. A chassid is one who actually will burn them. Now, spiritually, when you burn part of yourself, even though it's only your nails that you're discarding, there could be some harm. But a chassid would rather take the harm than give it the risk or danger of giving it over to someone else. So therefore, a chassid goes above and beyond the letter of the law. I'll just give another, pretty practical example, and that would be even, let's say, with Shabbat. We know that we're not allowed to work on Shabbat. We're not allowed to do melacha, which is a productive work, a creative type of work. But it says, according to rabbinical law, it says you shouldn't even speak about work. So you can't plan your work week on Shabbat. So you're not doing work. But according to rabbinical law, you're not even allowed to talk about the work, because that's not in the spirit of Shabbat. That's a known thing. So there's a lot of parts to it, but very practically, technically a person, let's say they have to be at a work meeting right after Shabbat. So technically, they could walk to the work meeting, and as soon as Shabbat is done, they could go in, and they didn't desecrate Shabbat. But you're kind of planning your work week on Shabbat. Or let's say there's a really important hockey game or basketball game that you want to be at. So you're not violating Shabbat by going to the game and showing your ticket and sitting in the crowd. I remember as a kid, I would go to New York to visit, and a lot of my friends were into the Yankees, and they were in the playoffs. So they obviously didn't turn on a TV because they're not allowed to do that on Shabbat, but they would go to the corner bodega. They would go to the corner store where they had the game on, and they would all stare by the window to watch the game. So technically that's okay, but it's not in the spirit of Shabbat. So you shouldn't speak about your business on Shabbat. But going a step beyond that is don't even think about the work week, meaning don't even plan, not verbally, but in your mind. That's going above what the law says is don't work. Rabbinically, you don't talk about your work. Going a step beyond it is don't even think about your work, meaning it's beyond what you're supposed to be doing on Shabbat. Then the next one is to change your midot. Chassidus came, good morning, Steve. Chassidus came to change the way you behave, your behavior, your feelings that are that you're acting on. So, and Naomi, I know last week you wanted to understand more the difference between the expressions. So I just researched it a little bit, trying to understand it. One is you're taming a behavior. Let's say a person is impatient and they're always looking at the in the Costco line. They're always going to look at which line is shorter, and they would get aggravated. They would get aggravated if they end up in the longer line. So working on yourself it's okay. I could wait in the longer line and it's not the end of the world. That's one way. That's like almost in the terminology here, it's Leshanot Midot Hativim, which is to change a person's a person's natural characteristics. So you're impatient or you get angry easily. You're going to work on not getting angry easily. You're going to work on not being so impatient. That's one step that Chassidus does. A step beyond that is to realize that it's not only I could control myself from being impatient, or I could control myself from getting angry or having a short temper. A step beyond that, what Chassidus helps us to do is to accomplish that you could transform that behavior totally, that it's not even an urge anymore to become angry, that you're going to control yourself. So in Kabbalistic terms, there's an expression called iskafia, which is holding yourself back, subduing your desire, where you have an impulse. Oh, you have an impulse to lash out at someone, and you're going to control yourself. Or you have an impulse to eat the bag of potato chips. You're going to control yourself. You're not going to binge on it. A step beyond that is called, in Kabbalistic terms, in Aramaic, it's called ishapcha, which means it's transformed totally. Which means not only will I subdue or control my temptation to the chocolate cake or to yelling at someone, it's totally uprooted and it is actually transformed inside of me, where it's not even a thought that comes up that I have to control anymore. It says that the Alter Rebbe, when he was a student of his Rebbe, whose name was the Maggid, the Mizutcher Maggid, whose yahrzeit is also on the 19th of Kislev next week, he was the successor of the Baal Shem Tov. And it says that when the Alter Rebbe came to him as a student to learn from him, they obviously had a bond. And when it came time for him to leave, the Maggid, who was his teacher, the Rebbe, sent his own son to accompany him along the road. It was almost like an honor thing. He sent his son, Avram, his name was, he was known as the angel. He sent him to accompany the Alter Rebbe, the student, on his first leg of his journey back home. So it says that while they were walking, the son of the Rebbe, his name was Rebbe Avram, went up as they were walking, told Alter Rebbe that as you go on the horse, you should make sure the horse knows that it's a horse, meaning you're the one leading the horse. The horse is not the one leading you. Meaning, make sure you keep the horse in check, the animal in check, that it knows that it's a horse. So in Yiddish, the term was schmeißen die Pferd, which means, hit the rod or whatever it is, the whip on the horse, so it knows that it's a horse, that it's not taking over. But another way of how it was understood is not only that you should hit the horse, that it should know it's a horse, you should hit the horse that it's not a horse anymore. And obviously, the Alter Rebbe understood this as a lesson for life, that we all have that animal inside of us. And there's one thing we could do is subdue the animal, hit it, control it, make sure it knows that it's not in control. But a much stronger way is control it to the point where it's not even an animal anymore. It's actually more an ally to the good side. It's not even bringing you temptations anymore. So that's changing the very nature of one's character, where you don't have an impulse anymore of yelling. Your impulse is going to naturally be of kindness. Instead of your impulse to judge other people, your impulse will naturally be to see the good in other people and to judge them favorably. And that's what Chassidus, one of the things that Chassidus accomplished, is to be able to see yourself and to see others and see world from this light. And finally, Chassidus gave us the language to refine ourselves, and it illuminates a part of us that we could see how godly light is coming into this world, and it gives us more of an understanding that we could relate to it, relate to this godly light. So that was the first section. And then the Rebbe says something beautiful. All of that is true, but that's not what Chassidus is. That's extensions, that's results of having Chassidus. But Chassidus has to be one essence where all of these beautiful elements come from. And so therefore the Rebbe, goes on, brings out an idea that the rest of the book is really to try to explain, which is what we're going to be doing over the next few weeks. But the Rebbe says Chassidus is a much deeper place. Chassidus is a godly light that is coming from God's infinity, which in Hebrew is called Ein Sof, God's infinite or non-ending light, which comes from the deepest parts of Keter. And within the deepest parts of Keter, it's the deepest parts of that. So it's all the way in God's infinite light. And once you tap into that essence, everything else extends from there. So that's what Chassidus is. Chassidus is this infinite light. As a result of having this infinite light, then a person goes above and beyond the letter of the law. There's a contribution that Chassidus does that it gives you the language to understand this deep light in our terminology. Chassidus comes and revives us. But that's not what Chassidus is. Chassidus is this infinite light. It's a new light that is coming into the world, that when we tap into it, we're getting all these other benefits also. It teaches us to go above and beyond the letter of the law, et cetera, et cetera. And Katie, to answer your question, flushing in the toilet is actually the pretty standard thing because it's hard to burn. That would be like what the tzaddik does about the nails. That would be like burying it, if I'm not mistaken. But people that are particular to be like a chassid, they would actually not just flush it down the toilet, which would be like burying because it's going to a place where no one could see. It still exists. Whereas burning them, you're totally removing it from the world. So I hope that answered that question. Okay, then we went to section 3, which was continuing along this theme. Just like in Chassidus, we see that there's an essence of what it is, which is this new light that is from the God's infinity that is brought down to this world. And then it extends to have all these beautiful branches of what Chassidus is. The same is also with Torah in general, and really with all parts of Torah, that Torah itself has so many beautiful contributions. There's ways you could appreciate the value of Torah in very relatable terms. God's Torah is a beautiful wisdom. God, my father, God of blessed memory, when he started learning Torah, and my father was a brilliant man, meaning he aced all his tests in medicine, but he got bored of becoming a doctor in medical school. So he went to get a PhD in chemistry, and he aced that also. So when he was doing his thesis for his PhD, for his chemistry, he came up with these beautiful things, and his books are still quoted. But when he started becoming more religious and started studying Talmud, he said that it was more of a challenge for him. It was like more enjoyable, something harder for him to study a page of Talmud. And then, all the tests and study he had to do for his chemistry tests, it was more of a challenge. There was something more accomplishing or achieving in studying Torah. So Torah has so many incredible benefits, and really the truth of with any idea that's coming to the world, if you go to the bottom of it, you'll find that idea in Torah. So Torah has these incredible benefits, but that's not ultimately what the benefit of Torah is. Torah is something deeper than any benefits that are coming out of it. So so the Rebbe says Torah also, and this is um, on page 31 now, where the Rebbe says the essence of Torah is that it's completely united with infinite light of the Ein Sof. So I'm just going to close the door because all the preschool kids are just right around here. Much better. So just to quote that on page 31, Torah is completely united with infinite light of God's infinity, God's Ein Sof, which is enclosed within it in a perfect and total unity. So really, Torah comes out and extends itself to this world with a perfection and incredible wisdom and a gift of God that He gave us. But Torah is beyond the benefits. It has the benefits also, but Torah goes beyond it. And really, you could see that in all aspects of Torah. There's the literal understanding of Torah. There's the secret or behind the black and white of Torah that's called remez, which is like numerology. There's the derivative and the expositions of Torah. And then you have the mystical aspects of Torah. All of those also are beyond the way we're understanding it. But in all of those layers of Torah, they're within a framework, which means this is how you're able to understand it within this framework. Whereas Chassidus is not bound to a specific framework, and therefore you see this incredible light of Torah mainly in Chassidus over any other topic or any other category of Torah. So Chassidus is like beyond one specific category. That you could see this infinite light, this light of infinity of God, the way it's coming out of Torah. So now on page 32, which is where we're at now, and I'll be sharing my screen, the Rebbe is going to try to explain this through a beautiful explanation of Mashiach. And then later on, the Rebbe is going to be explaining it through a beautiful prayer that we say every day. And to see how Mashiach works is beautiful. And then, God willing, in a few weeks, we're going to see how it is in a prayer that we say every day, how to understand it from a pshat level, a literal level, how you understand this prayer from a mystical level, how you understand it from an analytical level, and how you understand it from a secret, like a remez level. And then the Rebbe is going to explain Chassidus, where you see Chassidus is not just a fifth dimension. Chassidus wraps all of the other dimensions together because it's not bound within a certain framework. Rather, it's beyond it, and therefore everything is interconnected through Chassidus. So the Rebbe is going to start it with explaining Mashiach, which is what we're about to do. And then we're going to go on to this prayer. So if you're looking in the book, it's going to be on page 33. And you're welcome, Katie. And I'm just going to pull it up on the screen as well. It is. Oops. Okay, so we're going to start with the ramifications of Mashiach, which means benefits that happen with the coming, benefits that happen with the coming of Mashiach. Uh, where do we go over here? Did that not share? Here we go. Could everyone see the screen? Some ramifications? Does that look right? Okay, good. No. Is it not sharing properly? Oh, you could see it? Okay.
I saw it.
Oh, okay. Okay, let's hope that stays in. Okay, so we're going to start with explaining ramifications, things that happen with the coming of Mashiach. And then we're going to also say the same thing where that's not what the essence of Mashiach is. What's the essence of Mashiach? So that's going to be the next 2 chapters. And just to explain one other idea, which will be helpful for here, some of you are certainly familiar where the Baal Shem Tov, on his birthday, which was on the 18th of Elul, he once had on Rosh Hashanah, which was shortly after his birthday, he had a spiritual meditation. In Hebrew, it's called the Dveikut, where his soul went up to heaven. He was still alive, but he was in a spiritual state. And his soul was like searching through the chambers for the chamber of Mashiach. And when it finally came to the chamber of Mashiach, Baal Shem Tov's soul asked the soul of Mashiach, when is Mashiach coming? Like the Jewish people are so in need of the end of all pain, and we need Mashiach. So that famous answer the Mashiach gave to the Baal Shem Tov is L'chasheyafutzu ma'yanesecha chutza. When the wellsprings of Chassidut, your wellsprings, which is the depth of Torah, the deepest parts of Torah, like a wellspring is the source of the pure waters, when that's spread out all over the world. So that's going to just be helpful for us to understand here. And that will take us to section 4. We can further clarify the definition of the essential nature of Chassidus through explaining the inner meaning of the idea of Mashiach. 4, and why do we have to talk about Mashiach? So the Rebbe says something very nice. From the reward of a commandment, we will know its essential nature. Since it is through the dissemination of the fountains of Chassidus that the master comes, referring to Kim Mashiach. But that's like what the Mashiach told the Baal Shem Tov, that when the master will come, when there's a dissemination of the fountains. Thus, from the concept of Mashiach, which is the reward, we will know what is the essential nature of Chassidus. So me and you know this in general. Whenever you get a reward for something, you'll know how valuable the work that you put in is. Based on the reward of something, you see the value of what the work is. So something that is a small reward, you know that there's not a lot of effort, a lot of investment that goes in. But when you know the value for something is so much greater, you'll know that the work you put in is so much more important. So you'll know something from the reward you get out of it. So Chassidus, when we study Chassidus, what's the reward? The reward is going to be Mashiach. And that's exactly what the Baal Shem Tov was told by Mashiach's soul himself. In the early 1700s, he was told that when Chassidus is disseminated all over the world, that's when Mashiach will come. So we'll understand more what is Chassidus by also understanding what is the reward. Because when you understand the reward of something, you get a greater understanding of what the work is. So the work is Chassidus, the reward is Mashiach. So let's delve into Mashiach a little bit, and that will give us a greater understanding and appreciation of what the work is, which is Mashiach. Let's see some of those footnotes. So that would be footnote 30. And this is he just quotes from the Mishnah of Ethics of the Fathers, which is the reward of a mitzvah is a mitzvah. So the Tanya understands that's a Mishnah from Pirkei Avot. Schar mitzvah, mitzvah. That's the quote of the Mishnah. But the way the Alter Rebbe understands it in chapter 39 of Tanya is that the reward of a mitzvah reflects the essential nature of that mitzvah itself. So the mitzvah itself is the reward. When you do a mitzvah, the reward is that you're connecting with that mitzvah. So what is the deeper connection? It is going to be the reward, which is Mashiach. So that's not a real footnote. Okay, so this is one of the long ones. We're going to see it, even though I said some of it with you. It's a very long one, but I think it's worthwhile to still do. Here we go. When Mashiach asked the Baal Shem Tov, was asked by the Baal Shem Tov, whoops, sorry guys. when he would come, his response was, when your fountains of Chassidus will be disseminated to the outside. The Baal Shem Tov recorded this incident in his well-known letter describing his soul's ascension on high on Rosh Hashanah in the year 5507, which is 1747. The letter is printed at the end of Ben Porad Yosef and in a book of letters by the Baal Shem Tov and his students. It is also printed in Ginzei Nistarot, so he just explains where the source of this story is coming from. It was from the Baal Shem Tov's own writings. The Baal Shem Tov, the Likutei Diburim, which is from the previous Rebbe, explains the Baal Shem Tov's question and Mashiach's answer according to Chassidus. The Baal Shem Tov asked Mashiach, Master, when are you coming? It would seem that this was an unwarranted question. Consider the following explicit episode in the Talmud Sanhedrin. Rabbi Shua ben Levi asked this question of Elijah the prophet and was told to ask Mashiach himself. Mashiach's reply was, today. So again, a great Talmudic sage, his name is Rabbi Yeshua, asked Mashiach, when are you coming? And Mashiach answered, I'm coming. In Hebrew, he said, Hayom, today. When Mashiach did not come, Rabbi Yeshua returned bitterly, depressed to Elijah, who explained that this answer meant today, if you listen to my voice, which is a quote from the book of Psalms. That is, Mashiach could come only when Israel listened to the voice of God. With such an explicit reply in the Talmud, why did the Baal Shem Tov again ask the question, Master, when are you coming? We already knew the answer. So the Baal Shem Tov is the Moshe Rabbeinu of the entire school of Chassidus, for he was chosen by God to be the one through whom the teachings of Chassidus at large were revealed. Similar to Moshe, the Baal Shem Tov was a shepherd of Israel who was concerned for even the least of his flock. Known for his great love for all of Israel, the Baal Shem Tov could find virtue in every single Jew, and in every mitzvah he could perceive the true radiance within. He witnessed the great self-sacrifice of his fellow Jews, the pain which they were suffering in exile, the splendor of all their mitzvot, and thus the way in which they were listening to God's voice. And so his soul ascended on high and visited the heavenly palace of Mashiach and asked him, Master, when are you coming? In response, Mashiach told the Baal Shem Tov, when your well springs will be disseminated abroad, which is a quote from Proverbs. Rashi over there in Proverbs comments, you will ultimately acquire disciples and give forth instruction publicly, and your name will be renowned. Chassidus explains the term wellspring, the space required by a wellspring is but sinewy, is that how you pronounce it? And restricted. And its waters trickle forth by drops. A river, in contrast, covers considerable length and breadth, and its abundant waters flow turbulently from its place of origin to the outside, to places which are not even fit for it. Likewise, Chassidus has to spread abroad and become so popular and widespread that everyone would be able to know the Baal Shem Tov's teachings and be familiar with this godly understanding. So, just to summarize this, it's a beautiful way of understanding it, where how did the Baal Shem Tov ask this question when this question was already asked by someone in the Talmud, by Rabbi Yeshua? And the answer is because the Baal Shem Tov, he was like the Moshe of his generation. Just like Moses brought Torah to the world, and Moses was the defender of the Jewish people with all the sins of the golden calf, and he was always able to see the virtue and the truth and the goodness of the Jews. The Baal Shem Tov, obviously millennia later, and a couple hundred years ago, he was also able, as a shepherd of the Jewish people, he was able to see the good and see the suffering that they were going through, and therefore his question had a lot of weight. When are you coming? And the answer was about the well springs, is that it should come from this source of a place, but then it should be able to go all the way to the farthest corners. So it was kind of, obviously it's good to understand these things greater, but the point is going to be that when we understand what Mashiach is, it will give us a better understanding of Chassidus. Let's see if it's worth 33, doesn't have much. Okay, so let's continue over here, the next paragraph. This is on page 34 if you're looking in the book, or right here in the middle. With the coming of Mashiach, many sublime events will be introduced. So what's going to happen when Mashiach comes? Lots of good things. For example, Israel and the Shekhinah will be redeemed from exile. That's going to be the best. Even greater, all Israel will be great sages. They will know the things that are now concealed and will attain an understanding of their Creator. For the earth shall be full of the knowledge of God. Even greater yet, there will be a change and great innovation in the works of creation. So here's already three things that we said that will happen when Mashiach comes. The greatest of all will be that Israel will no longer be in exile, which means when Israel is in exile, the Jewish people are in a state of spiritual exile. The Shekhinah, which is God's divine presence, is also in exile with the Jewish people. So when we will be redeemed, God's Shekhinah will be redeemed. So that's awesome. Even greater, we'll know everything that's concealed, which means all the people that have questions of why and how could God do this and why did this have to happen, those questions will be answered when Mashiach comes, because there will be the knowledge of God will be all over the world. And even greater, there will be a great innovation. And I just want to go through this because this is a big topic of debate about what will happen when Mashiach comes. So there's a lot of commentaries here at the bottom, and if you're okay with it, we're going to study it. It's delving into the nitty gritty of commentary between Maimonides and Nachmanides about will there be a change when Mashiach comes or not. So we're going to read this long footnote, go through it a little bit quickly, but then summarize it. Look at the Rambam. Rambam is the Maimonides, where he writes like this: that in the era of Mashiach, there will be no jealousy, and there will be an abundance of all delights, which is amazing. Although Rambam, Maimonides, maintains in the beginning of chapter 12 that the prophecies concerning the era of Mashiach, such as the wolf will lie down with the lamb, are only to be taken allegorically and not literally, yet he included predictions that in the era of Mashiach there will be great change. According to the view are as also favored by Kabbalah and Chassidus, that the descriptions are to be taken literally. How much more so will there be great changes? And look also at the Ravid, which is someone who has a dissenting view who disputes the Rambams. Okay. Perhaps the following explanation may be offered as a solution to the difficult issue. Rambam also maintains that there will be two distinct stages in the era of Mashiach after it has become certain that Mashiach has arrived. The first stage of the redemption is when the earth will be filled with the knowledge of God. And it is this period wherein there will be no great change to the nature of creation, which Rambam refers to in the entire chapter cited above. This corresponds to Rambam's laws of Teshuvah, that the era when the earth will be filled with the knowledge refers to the period in which the world will operate according to its natural order. Accordingly, one can understand the following question from a commentary. How can Rambam follow the Talmudic opinion of Shmuel, that there will be no great change in creation when Mashiach comes, and that all the prophecies are allegorical, if elsewhere he follows the opinion of the sages that there will indeed be a great change in creation, and that the prophecies are to be taken literal? We're going to skip the parentheses. One can answer the statement in Talmud and Rambam concerning the era of Mashiach that there is no difference between the present age and the era of Mashiach, besides the servitude of the nations, refers only to the beginning of redemption. However, in the second stage, Rambam also agrees that there will be great change and that the prophecies will be literal. Okay, so we're going to stop there. There's other commentaries on it, but just to explain that idea in short, it's a beautiful point that I just want to bring out in very short. According to the Rambam and based on Chassidus, there will be two periods, two eras, two segments of Mashiach. The first one is when we'll be redeemed from exile, we'll rebuild our temple, we'll have a Jewish king, but the order of the world will kind of remain as it is, which means the Jewish king, known as Melech HaMashiach, the king of the Jewish people, will kind of lead the entire world into peace and into unity. And as a result of that, there will be no more war, and there will be no more jealousy, and there will be no more hunger. But there still will be a world order. There still will be people doing business. The Jewish people will be living in Israel and having the temple, but the world order will still remain as it is. We'll still need to eat and sleep every day. We'll still need to we'll have everything we need so we can study Torah, but still will be a world order. So there still will be Uber that's helping people get from place to place. There still will be vehicles and gasoline. There still will be a world order the way it is. It's just that we'll have a King Mashiach that's going to bring peace. The next era of Mashiach, which is level 2.0, is when our loved ones will return, and the world order will change from its natural place, which means we won't need to eat anymore. We won't need to sleep the way we understand it. Things will be in an incredible way that's so miraculous. So in the first order, there won't be the great miracles that we dream of. In the second order, there will be. So that prophecy of the wolf lying with the lamb, etc., according to the Rambam, will be in the second stage, the second era of Mashiach. There is a dissenting view, which is of Nachmanides, that says that's going to happen right away. But those are just the two ways of understanding. It's kind of parenthetical. The point for us over here is you see incredible contributions that's going to happen with the coming of Mashiach. There will be redemption. We'll understand what's concealed, and we'll understand the ways of God. And there will also be change into the world order, which according to the Rambam will be in the second era. Concerning the Talmudic saying that the sole difference between the present and the days of Mashiach is delivery from servitude to foreign powers, which means there won't be that big of a change. This refers only to the beginning of the era of Mashiach, which is just what we were talking about. And particularly according to the Rai Mehemna, which is a part of the Kabbalah, the Zohar, this statement was meant to pertain only to ignorant people and not to those who learn it in Torah. So continuing to detail the innovations to accompany the coming of Mashiach, the aspect of divinity which transcends nature will then be revealed. Therefore, the name of God will be pronounced as it is written. So not to confuse this with in a certain, if you ever heard of Jehovah Witness, they say how to understand the pronouncing God's name. That's actually not the correct way of saying God's name. It says that when Mashiach comes, we will understand how to pronounce God's name correctly. So right now, God's name is spelled in different ways. The Tetragrammaton, which is the holy name of God, I mean, they're all holy, but the holiest, I guess, is 4 Hebrew letters of a Yud, a Hey, a Vav, and a Hey. And Kabbalistically, there's a lot of discussion on this holy name of God. If you've studied Tanya with us and studied the Tshuva letter with us, you understand that each letter is a part of creation of the world. The Yud is the initial flash of creation, and then it expands into the Hey. It's drawn down through the Vav, and then it comes into this world through the Hey. But those are 4 layers. 4 letters are 4 layers of God's energy in creating the world. But nowadays, we don't pronounce God's name with the Yud, the Hey, the Vav, and the Hey. We always pronounce it as like we say a blessing, Baruch Atah, then we say Ado, and I'm not going to say it because I'm not in a blessing now, but that's the name of God that we pronounce for, even when it's spelled Yud, Hey, Vav, and Hey, we still pronounce it with like as if it's an Aleph, Dal, and Nun, Yud, which is not the correct way, but that's the way we do it in exile. When Mashiach comes and we'll have our temple rebuilt, that's when the Kohanim will pronounce the name of God. And actually on Yom Kippur, one of the prayers we say is, as we remember that the Kohen Gadol would say the name of God, everyone would fall on their face. And we actually do that. And if you've come to our shul on Yom Kippur, you perhaps are familiar, when the Chazan is up to that point, we all fall on our face. It's the only time of year where we actually bow and prostrate ourselves, which is when we remember how they pronounce the name of God, but we don't actually pronounce it, because only when Mashiach comes will it be pronounced. So this is another innovation, another incredible aspect that will happen when Mashiach comes, is that there will be a divine light of God that will be revealed into the world. So the divinity, which transcends nature, will then be revealed. So we know that what is a miracle? A miracle is God's transcendent light transcending nature, and therefore the sea could be split, and therefore miracles could happen because the divine light of God is transcending that nature. When Mashiach comes, that's going to be the natural order. So the whole natural order of life will be suspended, and the miraculous order will become the natural. So divine aspect will transcend nature, and that will be revealed in the world, and that's why we'll pronounce the name of God the way it is written. For throughout the entire world, there will be a revelation of the name of Havaya, which is that Yud, Hey, Vav, and Hey, not pronounced correctly because we're not allowed to. He was, and Havaya stands for Hoya, hove v'yiyeh. I just wanted to show you in the Hebrew. I'm not expecting you to read Hebrew, but I just want you to appreciate the name of Havaya, which again over here, I'm just going to highlight it in the Hebrew. You can see there's no vowels underneath it, and also there's an apostrophe at the end of it because it doesn't want to give you the full name of God. Because if it would, then you can't throw out this book. So the book itself is careful, but the name Havaya, which is made up of a Yud, Hey, Vav, and Hey, if you take that Yud, Hey, Vav, and Hey, that spells all these three words. Haya, Hove, V'yiyah come from those same two letters. Yud, or three letters. Yud, Hey, Vav. All those spell out the name of God. So what we see is Havaya is Haya, Hove, V'yiyah. Haya means he was. Hove means he is. And Yiyah means he will be. So God, the transcendent divine aspect, which is from this name of God, which will be revealed when Mashiach comes, is past, present, and future is all happening simultaneously, which we can't understand what that is because we live in a natural order. But when the natural order is suspended and the name of God, of Havaya, is revealed, then everything can happen simultaneously. Throughout the entire world, there will be a revelation of the name of Havaya, which is he was, he is, he will be simultaneously, the name that is beyond time and space. And this revelation will be similar to that which was manifest in the times of the Beit HaMikdash. So just to explain what happened in the times of the Beit HaMikdash, some of you may be familiar with some of this. We know that when we lived in the times of the Beis Hamikdash, in the temple times, there were miracles that happened in the Beis Hamikdash every single day. Some of them that you may be familiar with, it says, Omdim Zekufim, when we would stand in the temple to pray, especially on the holidays when there was a pilgrimage, which means Jews, millions of Jews came from all over, we all stood in the temple very confined, meaning there were so many people there. The temple was not that big of a space. So we were all cramped together like sardines. But when it came time to prostrate ourselves, like I said, when they mentioned the name of God, it says they all had space to prostrate themselves. Now, naturally, that doesn't make sense. If you're standing crammed, it doesn't make sense that when you're prostrating, you'll have space because that takes more space. Even my father-in-law, he says that when he started becoming more religious and he went to 770 to pray, and he was already observant, but it was his first experience of being in the Rebbe synagogue, which is in Crown Heights in New York, for the holidays. He said like he had an itch on his back. So he just, went back to scratch his back. But by that time, that space that he had, that he put his arm behind his back, they were so squeezed together like sardines in the Rebbe synagogue that he wasn't even able to get his arm back in front, meaning the little space that he had where his arm was that he put behind him, the little space was taken away from him because someone got pushed there. And by that time, he couldn't even move his arm back forward because they were squished like sardines. So that's a little bit of a glimpse into what it probably looked like in temple times. But yeah, when it came time to prostrate, they all had space. Another great miracle. It says that on the altar there was a constant fire. It was called an eish tamid, a constant flame burning, and there was a smoke. There was a specific, by the incense, there was a specific ingredients that they would use in order for the smoke to go up. But even though it was outdoors, there was no roof on top. Yet the pillar of smoke always went straight up. It never was moved side by side. We all know when you do a barbecue or a bonfire, the smoke, depending on the wind, pushes in different directions. But in the temple, the smoke always was a pillar going straight up. And perhaps the most famous that you're familiar with from our previous studies, it says that the area, the space of the Holy of Holies was a specific space. It was 20 cubits wide by 10 cubits long. Now, what's fascinating is that there was an ark that took 2.5 cubits space, but yet from either side, from one side of the ark until the wall, there was still 10 cubits. And on the other side of the ark until the wall was another 10 cubits, even though the whole space was 20 cubits, which means the 2.5 cubits that the ark took was there, but yet there was still 2.5, even though there was those 2.5 cubits taking up space, there was still 10 cubits from either side of the ark until the wall, which naturally doesn't make sense. It either takes up space, so then there aren't 20, there aren't 10 cubits from either side to the wall because it's taking up space. But the natural order would say that doesn't make sense. But there was that miracle where the divine aspect almost transcended nature, where there was 2.5 cubits of space, but yet it didn't take up space. So that's a glimpse, those temple times is a glimpse to what it will look like when Mashiach comes, which is when the natural order will totally be suspended, and the divine aspect will be what's the normal, will be what's revealed in the world. So that's going to be when Mashiach comes. So that's another contribution of Mashiach, that there will be the divine transcendence, and therefore the name of God will be pronounced. Miracles will be happening all the time, which is amazing. These events, furthermore, will be innovations, not only in this world, but their spiritual corollaries will also be introduced into all the worlds. For the behavior of the supernal worlds proceeds according to the order of behavior of this world. And he gives an example of this statement. Again, this statement is a beautiful one. And the statement is that everything follows the behavior of the spiritual worlds happens based on the behavior of this world. And he gives an example, Rosh Chodesh and the festivals, for example, into which is diffused an additional measure of light, are established above in accordance with their establishment below. So I just want to explain to you what this means, and it's a beautiful thing. Many of you are familiar. When we pray on Shabbat, the Amidah has a blessing. The Amidah's blessing, the main blessing in the Amidah we say on Shabbat is Baruch Atah Hashem Mekadesh HaShabbat. Blessed are you, God, who sanctifies Shabbat. On holidays and on Rosh Chodesh, the blessing is different. The blessing is Mekadesh Yisrael V'Hazmanim. That God sanctifies, doesn't say God sanctifies the holiday. It says God sanctifies Israel and the holidays. And on Rosh Chodesh, we say God sanctifies Israel and the Rosh Chodesh. So the commentaries explain something so beautiful. In the olden days, now we have a calendar that hopefully in your house you have our beautiful community calendar. That's this one right here. But in the olden days, there was no set calendar. We know that how would we know when the new month was? And therefore, from the new month, we would count 10 days to Yom Kippur, which is on the 10th day of the month, or 15 days to the holiday of Passover, and 15 days to the holiday of Sukkot, etc., etc. It was all based on the testimony of witnesses. Witnesses would come and to the court, the Sanhedrin, the Supreme Court, and they would say, we saw the new moon last night, and they would interrogate them, make sure they were being correct. There were times when they lied, and therefore it had to be very significant in the interrogation. But if it came out that they were saying the true testimony, the court would rule that this day is Rosh Chodesh, and then the calendar for the next month would be set for when Passover is, when we eat matzah, when we read the Megillah, etc., etc. But it says the heavens don't have authority. The angels don't have authority of setting the calendar. It's only up to the court. So therefore, the upper worlds, the spiritual worlds, there's obviously so much light and energy that's happening on Rosh Hashanah, on Yom Kippur, on Sukkot, and on Hanukkah, etc. But they don't determine when that light is coming. That's determined based on the Jewish courts, based on Sanhedrin. So that's where you see a glimpse into how all the spiritual worlds are dependent and are defined based on what's happening in this world. And besides for that example that the Rebbe is bringing here, we also know that based on the mitzvah we do, that's what's accomplishing a great light in the spiritual world. So it's, again, another example that everything is happening based on this world. So as a result of that, the Rebbe says, and because the coming of Mashiach will completely transform the general condition of this world and all its particular aspects, there will be likewise corresponding change in the supernal worlds. So far what we know is when Mashiach comes, there's going to be incredible innovations in the world. So far, what we know of the innovations, what's going to be special, or in Hebrew it's called a chiddush, what's going to be novel, what's going to be the contribution of Mashiach. We know that there's going to be an end to our spiritual exile. We'll be redeemed from exile. The Jewish people will be, and also as a result, God's divine energy of Shekhinah will also be things that are concealed now will be revealed, which means questions that we don't understand why, or Torah that we don't understand the depth of it will be revealed when Mashiach comes. There will be innovations in the work of creation itself, which according to the Maimonides will only be at a later time, and according to Nachmanides will be earlier, but there will be amazing things happening in the world order, changes in the world order. But besides for that, there will also be innovations in God's divinity in this world, where we'll be able to pronounce God's name that in the temple. There will be miracles that are suspending nature from its world order, which will be transcended to a higher place. And as a result of what's happening in this world with all these great things, there will also be those innovations happening in higher spiritual worlds. But the Rebbe says, and we're going to end with this beautiful paragraph, yet, in spite of all that has been explained above, and the great magnitude, sublimity, and wondrousness, is that a real word? Wondrousness. I like that. In Hebrew, hafla'ah. Of all these matters, in truth, they are still only the ramifications of the essential point of Mashiach. So the Rebbe says all this is great, but that's not what Mashiach is. That's in Hebrew called histafut, which is like, those are branched out, those are extensions, those are ramifications, those are results of Mashiach coming. But that's not what Mashiach is. What's the essential point of Mashiach? So just to summarize what we learned today, and I'm not going to summarize all the parts of Mashiach, but what the Rebbe is trying to get to is to understand what is the essence of Chassidus. So today, what the Rebbe did in chapter 4, the Rebbe says to explain what the essence of Chassidus is, let's understand what the reward of Chassidus is, which is Mashiach. So let's understand the essence of Mashiach. And as a result of understanding the essence of Mashiach, that will give us a greater understanding of what the essence of Chassidus is. Because we know that the Baal Shem Tov asked Mashiach, when are you coming? And Mashiach says, when you spread forth the wellsprings of Chassidus to the world. So we know that Mashiach comes as a direct result of Chassidus. So to understand better what Chassidus is, let's understand what the result of Chassidus is, which is Mashiach, the reward of Chassidus, which is Mashiach. And if we understand the essence of Mashiach, it'll give us a greater understanding of what the essence of Chassidus is. So far we know great things about Mashiach. We know that it will change the world order. We know that we'll be redeemed from our exile. We know that there will be divine light coming into the world. We know that there's going to be, even on a spiritual level, spiritual worlds, great innovation. But that's not what Mashiach is. That's a result of Mashiach coming. But what is Mashiach? There has to be something greater. One essential point that everything else comes from. What that is, we'll, God willing, learn next week. Yes, let's take questions.
Rabbi, I have a question for you. When we were learning earlier with you, you talked about the 10 by 20 arc, and you talked about that as diminishment by Hashem so that we could actually understand it. If not this week, maybe next week, can you explain how that idea that you told us about, that diminishment, fits in with this whole idea? Because you did talk about the 10 by 20 or 20 by 20.
Yeah, I think that point back then was trying to explain how godliness came into a physical space. So that's a diminishment of God's light where you're restricting it to a space. The beauty of the ark is that it took up space and it didn't take up space. So that was, outside of the temple, everything revolves around time and space. Within the temple, time and space wasn't just suspended, it was a collaboration between time and space and what's beyond it. There was that intermingling of space and what's beyond it. And that was something, unrelatable to the outside of the temple world. Like we can't understand it. And that's, the diminishment of God's light. It came from the temple into the world, but it didn't just, it couldn't bypass the temple where there was like that bridge between space and beyond space. And then God's light could be diminished further into our world, which is just space and not beyond space. So that's where that diminishment, perhaps, if we discussed it a few times, I'm thinking that we're talking about from chapter 53 of Tanya, which is the end of the main section of Tanya, where it discussed it in that topic, if that makes sense. Any other questions?
When Mashiach comes, I don't know where I heard this. I think I might have heard it from your wife at the Torah and Tea.
Yeah.
There's going to be a fragrance outside of the world. Is that true?
Mostly, I mean, I would love to know the context and how she said it, but it says Mashiach will smell and know the truth from smelling. Usually now we have to see, right? Usually sight is the real deal. Like if you saw something, you could testify about it, but if you smell something, that's not enough of a testimony. It says
So you
Mashiach.
could smell the truth,
I guess so.
literally.
Mashiach will be able to
Wow.
smell the truth. And it almost like, on Motzei Shabbat, on Saturday night, we smell spice.
Mhm.
Because spice, not the spice, but the smelling is something that's like, the simple reason of why we smell spice on Saturday night by the Havdalah is because the soul inside of us is feeling a voidness that Shabbat left. Shabbat, the soul is elevated. And on Saturday night, the soul goes back to its weekday routine. It says that on Shabbat, an added soul joins the regular soul. So it's almost that it has company and it feels joy. As Shabbat leaves, that extra added soul leaves. So the regular soul feels a loneliness when you give it spice to smell. It brings a joy or a comfort to the soul. That's the reason why we smell spice. But the reason of why I'm sharing that is you see that how do you want to satisfy the soul? It's by a smell. More than music, more than a good food, it's a smell that kind of relates directly to the soul. So there's something spiritual about a smell above anything else. And you and I both know it. Like sometimes you smell something and you associate it with a certain person or a certain place. And sometimes you can't even fully describe it. It's a smell. So it's something much deeper. And when Mashiach comes, it says it'll have that depth of a smell. There was a great chassid. He was known as Rabbi Menachem Mendel of Vitebsk, and he lived in Russia. And he was a colleague. He was like the Rebbe of the Alter Rebbe. He was a giant, but he moved outside of Russia. He moved to Israel in the 1700s, and that's when the Alter Rebbe basically took over as Rebbe. But there's a story that when he lived in Israel, he lived in Tzfas in the north of Israel, and when he lived in Israel, there was a kid or someone went around blowing the shofar. And it says that when Mashiach comes, the shofar will be blasted. So people started saying, it means Mashiach is coming. It wasn't the month of Elul, it wasn't Rosh Hashanah, but someone was blowing the shofar, which means it's Mashiach. So everyone started going around saying, Mashiach is here, Mashiach is here. There was this great excitement. People started changing into their Shabbat clothing. And it says Rabbi Menachem Mendel heard by the window that everyone's screaming that Mashiach's here. So it says he went outside and smelled, and he says it's not Mashiach. Mashiach's
That's
not
the
here.
story.
Oh, that's the story she shared.
Yes.
So, and the beauty of that story is if he had to go outside, open the window to smell, it means that in his home, there was the smell of Mashiach, but it just wasn't there for the outside world yet. So there was something about that smell. Interesting. Okay, beautiful that she brought up that story. Okay, so God willing, next week we'll actually learn what the essence of Mashiach is, and that will give us a better understanding what the essence of Chassidus is. Awesome. If that's the case, everyone, have a great day. And we'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Bye,
Thank
everyone.
you.